This is honestly the greatest queen sack I've ever seen in a game of bullet chess. I mean, it's up there with the best of them in any time format, to be honest. So this was played between Alireza Firouzja and Daniel Nardoditsky. He's affectionately known as Danya. They're both absolute beasts at bullet chess. They play on chess.com. You can see by their ratings here. Now, this was played in April 2021. This was actually the last time we saw Alireza on the chess.com platform a year ago now. He's not played on this account since. Maybe he's been playing on a separate one, I don't know. But, you know, he's really stepped back from some chess recently, online, over the board as well. It's a bit of a shame for his fans. But anyway, I'm looking at this one. This actually won a prize, the chess.com Game of the Year, Immortal Game of the Year in the bullet category. So let's see what happened here. Danya kicked off with pawn e4. Alireza went d5, the Scandinavian defense. We had captures here. Queen recaptures. Knight c3 hit the queen, and it came across to a5 here, a very standard square. The knight now came to f3. Alireza went knight to f6, and the most common move here for white is pawn to d4, but Danya went for this g3 move, fianchettoing the bishop, and now Alireza plays very quickly here, so he goes bishop to g4, pressuring the knight. We had bishop g2, and now he doesn't go c6, knight b to d7, those standard themes of the Scandinavian Caro-Kann defense. He goes knight to c6. A much more aggressive setup, clearing the queen side, preparing to castle the king there. Now we had h3, the bishop dropped back, Danya goes pawn d3, preparing to develop, castles queen side from Alireza, and now bishop to d2, x-rays the black queen, prepares to hop the knight away, and so Alireza dropped back to b6 here. Now he pressures that pawn, but Danya simply castles. He's saying, okay, grab my b2 pawn, open the b file, I want to attack your king using my rook, my bishop, etc. Now in bullet chess, or any chess really, that's a very brave move. So of course Alireza doesn't take it. He goes pawn e5, great move, takes some space in the center here, opens up his dark squared bishop. And now this bishop came to e3. Again, Danya is goading Alireza to take that b2 pawn. Now, when you run this with the engine, it's quite interesting. That's the top line of the engine, to take the pawn, no fear, grab the material. Of course, you never do this in bullet. It's very hard to calculate at all. So instead, the queen came to a5. And now pawn a3 from Danya, and he's preparing to go pawn b4, start attacking the black king. But what does Alireza do here? Well, an excellent move, pawn to e4. So there's a pin down the d file here against the queen, so you can't capture that one with pawn or knight. Danya goes pawn b4, he strikes at the black queen, and of course this is the moment where Alireza unleashes this exceptional tactical combination. And what I absolutely love about this queen sack is it's actually sound. I mean, white emerges a bit better, but it really is a phenomenal move to find in bullet. So Alireza takes on f3 here, he lets his queen be captured, but then he takes on g2. And the beautiful thing about this sacrifice is that now this bishop hits the queen, but the pawn also hits the rook. So after pawn g4, blocking that attack on the queen, then black takes here and takes with check. So this one was recaptured, now the bishop drops back, and when the smoke clears, we can see that black has rook, bishop and knight for the queen. So it is actually a kind of level material piece here, white's a pawn ahead, and actually white now uses that pawn. This is the only move to keep advantage, interestingly enough. So pawn a6 is played, great move. If you give black one more move, they'll go pawn a6, they'll stop that attack there, they'll cover b5, whoops, misfire, b5, but pawn a6 forces b6, and now after queen to g2, you can see some of the problems. White's got the initiative here, it's Swiss cheese around the black king, this is dangerous. So rook d6 was played, holding the knight, but now the knight came to b5, hits the rook, it came across to e6, still holds the knight on c6, and the best move here for Danya, if he'd found it, in a way I'm surprised he didn't because he's so tactically astute, but he could have taken on a7 here, takes with check. After the knight recaptures, we hop in like this. You can also come to a8 with check. You pick up the knight, and the difference with this variation is after bishop to d6, queen b7, this rook dropping back to stop the pawn, now a7 comes immediately, forces rook a8. White's just a whole tempo up on what we saw in the game in this variation. But if I run it back, we didn't have the knight taking on a7. Daniel missed that one. He went knight to d4 instead. Now he forces this one to be captured. Then he checks here before recapturing on d4. King d7, that's an important move, not king d8. You want to open the rook to come and defend on the a file. Now he takes on d4, but here Alireza gets bishop d6, a move sooner. And now after takes, the rook drops back, queen b7, clearing the way for the a pawn. Here Alireza has that extra tempo, the pawn's not yet on b7, so he should go rook to b8. Now white doesn't want to put the queen here, boxing itself in, blocking the pawn. So if you drop back like this, then black can go rook to a8, and you're actually picking up that pawn. If you come back with the queen here, well then we're bringing this rook across. So best here would be, say, pawn h4, black picks up here, game goes on, white's still a bit better, but roughly level. But Alireza actually missed this idea of kicking the queen to start with. Of course, they're just playing on seconds, no criticism, of course. He goes rook a8 instead, coming in front of the pawn, but now Daniel gets pawn to a7 and he covers the b8 square. You can't bring a rook there anymore. Suddenly the rooks are really tied down to the defense. So Alireza brought this rook to the e file now. He wants to start attacking soon, and best here for Daniel was takes on b6 with the bishop, using the fact that this pawn is pinned to the king. But instead he goes pawn a4, running this one down, looking to rip open the position, using this b pawn as a hook. Good move. Alireza goes pawn h5. He wants to start attacking on the king side. Daniel goes g5 to close things down. And now another excellent move by Alireza. I mean, it's kind of forced, but it still looks awesome to see on the board. He goes knight to e4 here. So he jumps that one in, he leaves a whole piece to be taken, just exceptional feel for the position that he has. Now Daniel takes that, but it's not actually best, so he should actually carry on with his plan of pushing this pawn. Then this knight could actually jump to c5 as a sample variation. You can't really live with that one there, so the bishop would chop, pawn recaptures is then best, so that white can't be taking here. Game goes on, white's a bit better still with check on b5, but this was actually best for Daniel, just pushing the a pawn immediately. Instead he takes this knight, but now it brings Alireza's bishop into the game. Look at the monster diagonal that one's just hit. So the queen came back to a6, and now Alireza drops to c6 here with his bishop. He wants to cover the checks from here, and again the best here for Daniel was pushing on with pawn to a5. Now probably why he didn't do this is he was worried about pawn b5. Looks like your queen is just getting trapped in, and you're just making split decisions in bullet chess, of course. But the key for white here is you can actually go pawn c4, and you're liberating your queen, you're unboxing it. White's a lot better. So a5 was the way to go, but Daniel went queen c4 instead. He evacuates that queen, prepares pawn a5, also hits the f7 pawn, preparing to take with check. That's why Alireza went pawn to e6. Now Daniel goes pawn a5, but in this whole line, when the queen left that defense of the a pawn, now Alireza gets to take on a7, of course. And the key now is white can't actually take on b6 anymore, because now black's taking here with check, and after the bishop recaptures, the rook slams down on the e-file. Look at that bishop pair raking across the board, really beautiful. White's actually forced to give up the queen here, completely game over, of course. So running it back here, you can't actually take the pawn on b6. Best here for white was pushing on with a6, keeping this rook tied down. Alireza would maybe go pawn f6, try and rip open some lines. But instead Daniel goes queen to d3, perhaps looking at c4 in future, clearing the way for that one, pressuring down the d-file now. But now Alireza can actually just take on a5, and for the first time in the game since he sacked the queen, he's actually better in this position. Just phenomenal stuff. So he's wrestled the initiative back, and again white has problems. You can't take this rook, or once again your back rank is a massive problem, you have to give up the queen. And that's why Daniel actually moved the rook away here to d1, just to show you the best move. He should have gone king to f1 here. Really tricky to spot this, of course, because now black can't take here or the bishop recaptures. That's just a rough equality. But if black takes here, like we saw in the game, you're not taking with check. So this gives white an extra move, and you can go bishop to e3. This is critical, blocks the e-file from this rook, and now the king can get on its running shoes. So if you were to go bishop g2 check, well, the king can step across, you know, you've got some space to run away. So that's why king f1 was best here. But Daniel goes rook d1, very human move, low on time, of course, comes to the d-file, comes away from the rook's attack. But now we had takes here with check. Look at those bishops, king to f1, they're raking across the board, and now bishop g2 check comes, the e-file is blocked by the black rook, so it has to step back. Now bishop e4, discovered check, picking up the queen, the whole house is collapsing. So queen g3 blocked, Alireza took, Daniel now chucked in this bishop e5, discovered check, but it's really just a hopeless last ditch effort. The rook blocks here, we had captures on g3, and now Alireza took here with check. This was the final move of the game. I'm not sure if Daniel resigned or lost on time, but even so, it was about to be mate, because after king h2, this would have been mate in the corner. What an exceptional game from Alireza Firouzja. If you want to see another one of his beautiful queen sack games, click here. Thanks very much for watching. See you soon.